SQL injection allows people to actually exfiltrate data from a database by using very specific payloads that we will not see too much in depth this time around. We will use SQLmap, which is a tool that practically automates SQL injections for us, but there are some considerations that we'll have to make for those cases where exploiting SQL injection vulnerabilities will not be as easy. Now, what I want you to do is Randy Orton, Randy Savage. So we can download Web for Pentester, which has several different vulnerabilities. Now we'll be interested in SQL injections for this video, and then later on with file upload vulnerabilities that you cannot see here, but I would advise you to read all of this, which is interesting. Well, it's not as exhaustive as the OWASP testing guidebook, which is basically the Bible for web penetration tests. But just click on attachment files and download it, and then you'll find it wherever you downloaded it to. I downloaded it on the desktop, then open up VirtualBox. You should have Kali installed, of course. Click on New. Let's call it Web or Pentester. Then let's select the ISO image. This is a live ISO DVD, so you will not need to have a virtual hard disk. Finish. Click on Settings. Set it to be bridged. Otherwise, you will not be able to reach it. Start Kali. Now, if you type ifconfig on the target machine, you will be able to see what the IP is, but we'll just pretend that we don't know what the IP is in the subnet. And so I'll also teach you how to perform a ping sweep with the nmap tool. Now we'll have to scan the entire subnet, the entire gateway subnet. So this is our gateway subnet. So we'll scan that with nmap with /24. /24 means the 255 hosts that are under the subnet. Now, usually VirtualBox machines have a banner of PCS System Technic GmbH, so we'll know for a fact that it's our VirtualBox machine. 113 is ours, and so we'll see that the machine is 17. Let's see. Checks out. It's 17. There it is. Now we're interested in SQL injections. If you want to know how to approach this, you can always take a look at the OWASP testing guide manual. Should have it on the desktop. Read all of this. Now, these are the usual payloads, but we'll do that automatically. See, now it says ID2 name root. Oh, see that? This shouldn't have been possible. We got more data. We got actually more records from the database. This signals us quite obviously that there's a SQL injection. Now, there are two types of SQL injections that you can perform. One is against GET requests, and another one is against POST requests. Now, for GET requests, you'll see the key pair here with name as the parameter and then the value on the right. This is a GET request. POST requests will be those requests that you would usually perform against authentication mechanisms where the contents of the data will be actually only available in the request body. But let's start with something simple. To get a list of all the options that SQLmap has, you can just type SQLmap --help or SQLmap -hh to get even more options. Or you can just refer to the manual with man SQLmap. Now, to launch SQLmap against an endpoint, a get endpoint, you will do it like this. Now, if you want to tell SQLmap to attack a specific parameter, you can add an asterisk. Now, it will not be needed here because it's the only parameter, but let's do it anyways. Then we have to decide what's the level. I mean, it's the depth of the scan, or rather the number of HTTP requests that SQLmap will make. Let's go with 3. You have a range from 1 to 5. Then risk decides, I think it's the type of SQL queries it will try against the endpoint, where 1 will perform basically select queries. Now with 2, it'll also do, I think, insert and update queries, and with 3 also the delete ones. That will be quite problematic because I've seen some students that launched SQLmap with a level of 3 and basically destroyed the entire database, and they had to rebuild it from scratch. So let's go with 2. It saw the custom injection marker. Let's tell it yes. Now, when it recognizes what the database engine is, well, it's likely vulnerable. Okay, this is the result. When you launch SQLmap without giving it other options other than the ones we gave it, it'll just tell you that the vulnerability is there, and it'll tell you also what the working payload is, but it will not perform other actions. Now, if we want to dump, for example, only the name of tables, you can refer to the manual, and you can retrieve what the current user is, the current database, the password hashes, the databases, the tables, the columns, and so on. If you want to make it quick, you can just tell it dump all, and then also tell it --batch. With batch, it tells SQLmap to not stop at prompts. It will just reply with the default selection for every prompt. Now, if you were against a Cloudflare protected website, which isn't very likely if you're performing a professional penetration test, you will just tell it to have a delay of 2 seconds between each request, but will not be needed here because we're testing against our virtual machine. And as you see, it absolutely downloaded everything. You will find all of the contents here. CD, Ctrl-Shift-V, ls, tuner, which is the file explorer, the Kali file explorer, the XFCE file explorer. And then you'll find different folders, like for example, the log one. It basically printed out all of the standard output contents since we started the command. Now in dump, you will find the contents of the various tables that we've been able to exfiltrate. Information schema, it's just the MySQL database engine metadata, nothing interesting, but you'll find the entire contents of tables here in exercises, for example. Now, there are no authentication mechanisms, so we will not find these useful at all, but as a rule of thumb, anytime you find a user password combination, you should have to check for password reusability everywhere else in the application. If there's, for example, an SSH service, you will have to try, for example, user1 at the IP address with the given password, and also take care of the combinations. I mean, more specifically, the permutations. You will have to try, for example, an SSH brute force attack with the Hydra software. And once you get in, you will also need to do this for all of the other users on the server. And so that's it. Now, let me remove this. Because SQLmap makes a note of everything that's been done up to that point against that specific IP address, so that it'll basically redo everything from scratch, because we want to learn a little bit more about how SQLmap works. Okay, what if this doesn't work? Let's try with the second example. It says that the URI parameter does not seem to be injectable. And then it also tells us to try and increase the values for level and risk if you wish to perform more tests, which is, I wouldn't advise that. What will be more efficient will be to use a tamper script, like it tells us here. Now, to get a list of all of the tamper scripts, just type in SQLmap --list and then tamper, and there are various tamper scripts, like for example, space to comment that replaces spaces with a slash asterisk asterisk slash character combination, or uppercase that will convert all of the payloads in uppercase. Now let's try doing it again. Another thing, you can define the verbosity level of the scan with V from 1 to 5. You can just type 4 V's if you wanted to have a verbosity level of 4. And it will basically print out all of the requests and the responses that SQLmap does, right? Didn't find anything, but it's basically encoding all of the spaces like this with %20, for example. Now let's try. We've seen that this doesn't work, so let's try again with a tamper script called space to comment. And as you see, it will convert all of the -20s, which are spaces, URL encoded spaces, to actual SQL comments. But I made a mistake. See, all of the spaces are now converted to comments. But this is quite a mess. Let's just see if it works. Let's not dump everything, and let's remove the verbosity level. I just wanted to show you that the spaces had been switched to comments. And we see soon enough that it's actually vulnerable this time around, because the second example was filtering spaces. So we've been able to correctly evade the filters. And so, nice. This worked. Now we will not be dumping all of the database contents this time around. We just know for a fact that it works. Now, with the batch option, our life will be quite easier, because we could create a bash script and then launch SQLmap absolutely against all of the application endpoints until we find something interesting, something that works. And yes, you will have to test for SQL injection against all of the endpoints. If a database is there, if there's no database, there's really no reason to test for SQL injections. Now, some pages, web pages, might not be immediately available. That is, you will, for example, have to authenticate yourself as a normal user in order to get access to, for example, a page that allows you to update your password, for example. In that case, you will have to save the HTTP request to a file and then launch SQLmap against it. How do you do this? Well, you can watch my other video on the burp suite, but you will have to launch the burp suite, then intercept the request and save it to file. And then you will just have to use another SQLmap option, which will not be -u, which stands for URL, but with R, which stands for requests, of course. So we start the burp suite, we enable it. Already did that. Intercept on. Let's refresh the page. And there it is. See here, we have a cookie. This cookie here, usually cookies are used to track what user is actually logged in within the application. Now, to make things easier to look at, we'll just send it to the repeater. See here, this is a normal HTTP request. Now, if this had been a post request, it would have had another look to it, which would have been like this. If you see here, the parameter is actually quote-unquote hidden, like it would usually happen with authentication forms, for example. Now change it back. Okay. Now we just right-click it, we copy it to file. Let's do it here. Let's call it example2.req. Doesn't matter how you call it. And now, this is the correct syntax to execute SQLmap against a request that's been saved to file. Doesn't matter if it's a GET or a POST request. You will have to test absolutely all of the endpoints. And we'll see that it doesn't work because we're not using the tamper script. And it says that it might not be injectable, of course, because we're not using a tamper script. Does not seem to be injectable. Oh. We also didn't define an injection marker. There it is. Could have been faster. Let's try another tamper script, like, for example, uppercase. Oh! It found it this time around. So, with either setting it to all of the payloads to uppercase or switching the encoded URL space for a SQL comment, it'll work. Nice. Let's ramp up the verbosity. I don't know if it'll make many requests because it's already found it. I did just one. Nope, gotta remove it. Let's try again. So now we can take a better look at the requests. See here, the space is still %20, but everything is absolutely uppercase right now. So that's why it works. So the filtering wasn't that great either in this second example. Very nice. Now, why is this important? Well, because if SQLmap isn't able to actually exfiltrate data from the database, we'll have to do this manually. It's very rare, but it might happen. And so in those cases, I would advise to use a high verbosity level for a SQLmap so that you see exactly what payload is the working one, and then proceed and do that manually. How would I go about and study that? Well, you can go to the exploitation website, then look for white papers, and there are many. Like here we see SQL injection in insert, update, and delete statements, which is not obvious. It is not beginner level SQL injection, but these are very good reads. And if you're feeling particularly hardcore, you can study the SQL Injection Bible by Clark. You can find it on Amazon.com. What? Well, maybe just a check. What? I don't think that Amazon.com likes me visiting it. Wait, calmly. I've been having some DNS issues lately, which makes me a little bit paranoid. So, this is the book. SQL Injection Attacks and Defense by Justin Clark. It's about 500 pages of just this, of just manual SQL injection. Yeah, it's more than 500 pages. It's actually for 547. And that's it. That's everything for a more or less gentle introduction to SQL injection attacks. So now I'll take 5 minutes and then we'll get back to the file upload vulnerabilities on this machine. I want to remind you that my InfoSec bundle courses are available in the description. You will start from 0 up to becoming an ethical hacker in a professional capacity. I'll deal with absolutely everything in those courses. So if you like this, go check it out. Now I'll take 5 minutes and we'll move on to the file upload vulnerability. See you then.